any company that is into edtech can have answers to has answers to your question, and or is at least pursuing them, could see the better tomorrow.
You know, when I'm most disappointed in life, I educate myself. Like, आज मजा नहीं आया, आज मैं घर जाके पढ़ूंगी कि ये होता क्यों है.
And the best part about humans is once we start talking about it, things get rolling.
I realized that poetry was the primal urge of all human beings to find an expression of being alive and demystifying them.
You spoke about how you went about learning, and even now how you are learning, how you enable yourself. There is a sense of curiosity in you, which you have already spoken about. Do you think curiosity is the key? Like, incepting curiosity is actually one of the most important things, the key towards heading into the cognitive revolution?
So again, okay, very simple answer for it. Curiosity is natural. It gets killed over time. It's not something that you need to breed in kids. It's just something you have to let remain. Kids are naturally curious beings. They go about the world. You know, imagine you're a little child, you're put in the center of this really, really overwhelming world that is killing you with its sensorial overload, and you're just trying to make little sense of things. So, okay, when I teach poetry, poetry is necessarily an act of creation, it's an act of creativity. And where does it begin? So there's this poet called Shelley who said that the language that a child speaks is poetry. If he wants to walk up to you and me and give us new names, he will just give them. Right? Then you won't be Ankit, I won't be Saumya, I'll be responding to whatever he's calling me. He doesn't want to call this plant a plant, he wants to call it meh. He'll just go ahead and call it, we will catch up to the vocabulary. That's how brave a child is, alright? You think kids who are not put in formal systems, they don't learn? They learn better, alright? So at one of these gatherings of parents, my CEO in one of the previous organizations that I've worked at asked the parents of nursery kids, at what age will you let your child cross the road herself? There was one parent who said 23. I don't know how specific did he turn out to be, but he said 23 years of age is when I will allow my child to cross the road. And we gasped together, we were like, oh my God. And you look at street kids, right? They'll be scurrying about the road, stopping traffic at their beck and call. It doesn't make them any less skilled, in fact, maybe more, right? So to answer your question about curiosity, we have to just let conditioning not kill curiosity. That's all. We have to stop demonizing curiosity, because you know what happens is people who are answering to that curiosity become uncomfortable. They suddenly get a sense of inadequacy. So like I was discussing with you earlier, my second TEDx talk was about building humanized spaces of learning where people who are delivering are as vulnerable as people who are learning. Our vulnerabilities make us accessible, and if you're not accessible as a teacher to your students, you may be giving the greatest gyan on the planet. Your kids are not listening to you.
You've been talking about poetry quite a lot. I know poetry is a big part of your life. How has poetry helped your story or helped your cause?
That's another hour-long conversation.
I understand.
How has poetry helped my story? I've never thought about it. But I just know that insofar as I was in school, I didn't enjoy poetry because I was essentially learning the Prasang Sahit Vyakya which my teacher gave me, and I had no role in creating it. What you do not create doesn't thrill you. What you cannot own doesn't thrill you. It started long back with this poetry initiative, I think 5-6 years ago now, where a bunch of us got together to listen to real poets speak their hearts out. And it was overwhelming for how brave an effort that was, right? These weren't polished poets. These weren't poets who had published books. These were poets who were scribbling little love notes at the back of their registers, or doing this android poetry, you know, writing poems to woo their people. Or they were writing poems to vent their frustration when in the morning the shower broke.
Everybody has done that.
Everybody has done that. So when I go to classes and I ask kids, okay, how many of you write? Few hands go up, and then I just simplify it for them. I was like, on the last birthday of your best friend, did you try to write something that doesn't exist on the internet? Yeah. Doesn't that make you a writer, a thinker, a creative artist? We all have that creative faculty in us. Even when you're thinking, okay, how to make the next person around us feel special. We are in a process of creating something that doesn't exist. We want it to be unique, right? That's imaginative. That's enough, okay? But coming back to your question about poetry, it started with people. It started with understanding that when someone is reciting in front of me, he's putting a little bit of his heart and his being out there without telling me enough, without telling me everything, because telling everything is going to be so scary. Imagine the whole world getting to know who you are. It's a terribly scary prospect, you know, getting to know everything about you. But what began there, my curiosity led me to pursuing it. Because I wanted to remain at the center of this poetry storm, I educated myself. You know, when I'm most disappointed in life, I educate myself. Like, आज मज़ा नहीं आया, आज मैं घर जाके पढ़ूंगी कि ये होता क्यों है. No matter whatever exists around me. So I started reading a lot of poems. And these poems answered things for me, answered questions for me, which I did not even know how to express, but which always lurked at the back of my mind. So today I know history, mythology, astronomy, philosophy, all through poetry. I realized that poetry was the primal urge of all human beings to find an expression of being alive. And that helped me. And then I used poetry. Then I used poetry to go back to my earlier conversation, to make people comfortable with the idea of who they are. If you hear the idea of who you are being enunciated and falling on your ears, it makes you feel much more comfortable than you were earlier. And if you see that idea being accepted, you feel more comfortable. So I'll tell you two things. When I started this forum called Poets Collective, it was happily called a poetry platform by everyone. And I said, no, it's not a poetry platform. It's a listening platform. It's a listener's platform. It's not a poet's platform. If I want to hear the best of poets, I'll go on YouTube or I'll buy books, which I can shut whenever I want. I can't shut people up who are in front of me, right? So more than a speaking, expressing, reciting culture, we are promoting a listening culture. That's critical to community building. That's critical to compassion building. That's critical to building cooperation amongst people who do not know each other. So that's the first way in which I employ poetry. And it happened organically. ये plan नहीं था. मैंने सोचा नहीं था कि ऐसे होगा. ऐसे हो गया. The second thing was classrooms. And when I say classrooms, you know, interestingly, I use a very fluid term. I have taken classes inside NGOs, inside schools, inside colleges, in amphitheaters, but I've also taken classes on Barakhamba ka metro station ka footpath, right? So okay, 6, 7 people, are you interested in meeting? Do you want to talk about post-colonialism today? Okay, let's talk about post-colonialism. Aa jao, right? And then we'll sit down and we'll talk about post-colonialism and we'll show them examples all around the Barakhamba ka footpath where it is still existing, where identity, memory, collective history is still finding manifestation and conflict is evergreen, right? So those are the classrooms I've loved the most. Central Park, Palika, right? Any place, public places were for discourse. The idea is even if the space shifts, the conversation and the discourse sort of remains. But now I have to give you specific examples. So I was at a workshop in Saharanpur and I was telling my kids about this today itself for about these 100, 200 odd kids from schools there, and I, being a Delhi wala, just went there thinking ki I will teach them, I will tell them how it's done, all right? You go with, Delhi gives you a certain ridiculous arrogance, you know, especially when you're going to tier 2, tier 3 cities. It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing. When I went there were too many kids. So I said, okay, let's simplify this. Let's do an activity in metaphorization. What is poetry but expressing yourself in things that are different, things, comparing yourself to, or giving voice to intangible ideas. By intangible, I mean, most of life that we experience is intangible. Frustration, love, sorrow, emotions we still haven't found a name for, right? So I said, chalo, theek hai, hum metaphorize karenge cheezon ko. I'll give you an object and you tell me another comparable thing for it. See what you see in it, see the unseen in it. So I gave them a couple of objects and 2 answers that I remember from them were, the object that I gave them was a sky. And one kid stands up and says, ki ma'am, aasman to udta hua samandar hai. And I was like, okay. And then उस उड़ते हुए समंदर में मछलियाँ उड़ रही थी और चिड़ियाँ तैर रही थी और वहीं पे बैठे बैठे हमने एक पूरी कविता गढ़ दी जो आज तक मेरे जहन में है. And the second thing I remember from that workshop was the object I gave them was time. I said metaphorize time. All right, so one Kid stands up and he says, he picked up clock. Time is an abstract concept. People relate better to concrete concepts. So he picked up a clock and he said, you know, ma'am, the clock is my family. The hour hand of the clock is my father who leaves early and he comes back late. The minute hand of the clock is my mother who takes a stock of minute to minute things, right? And she does everything. The second hand of the clock are as kids, हम कुछ नहीं करते, we just keep going about, but हमसे पता चलता है कि घड़ी चल रही है या नहीं चल रही है. और दिन में एक बार ही हम सब मिलते हैं. We meet once. Wow, I think I lost my head standing there. I had goosebumps. And I was like, मैं इनको क्या सिखाऊंगी? If you let your kids be, right, they'll get information. We are in the information technology age where so long as you can learn technological literacy, you're sorted, which is organic, right? I mean, kids know it better than us.
Your answers keep promising hope, you know. This explanation fits perfect to the analogy that poetry is like, you know, glass cleaner on a grubby car window, wherein it brings out vulnerabilities in humans and makes us understand each other much better. The question that I have for you now is, and please don't hate me for this, it is a difficult question. It is one of those macro questions, yes, but it's a question that troubled me initially when I came across this. So during the initial times when I got into education and kind of dedicated my life into changing education for the better, I met this girl who was at the time working for the United Nations as into food security. So she was working with a lot of refugees. She had just finished time in Sudan for 2 years, and for 1 year at the time she was working in Bangladesh. We were having a discussion on education, and she spoke about of how more than 85% people in these refugee camps are dying because of simple things like, you know, diarrhea. And she questioned of how your noble pursuit of education would change any of this. If I raise the same question to you, how would you answer it?
See, you can't be everywhere, right? There are a million different kinds of problems that the world is battling with. Education is a huge answer to a lot of things, but not to all of these things, right? You're talking about problems of diarrhea. You can also talk about problems where you wake up one morning, you're not really sure whether you're going to come back home alive or not. That's that kind of violence that exists there. I mean, why go far off here? In your own country, there are systems where instances of violence are normalized. So यहाँ पे गोली चल रही होंगी, यहाँ से बच्चे लाइन बना के they would be going to school, right? You got to pick your battles, okay? Since you began at a very personal story, I'll tell you a personal one. When I started getting fascinated with the field of education, I was ridiculed by a lot of people. हाँ, तुम क्या जानो education को passion बनाना है, cause बनाना, तुम्हें नहीं पता, तुम तो बहुत ऐसे AC वाले schools में काम कर रही हो. But there are so many schools in the country where this is not available, that is not available, and a lot of things. Of course, that's a huge problem. That's a grave problem. But I could never communicate to them that, hey, listen, this is the space that I exist in, and I'm bringing about some positive change here. I do not want to abandon this and go in the pursuit of a social problem I do not understand the dynamics of. I will someday go there, all right? So it took a lot of effort, but finally I started teaching in a rural school in Bulandshahr, which was also enabled by a very, very forward city-based organization. And again, I went there as a Delhi-bred person saying, मैं तो सब change कर दूंगी. I will teach them, all right? I came back humbled and I came back having learnt. And again, I'll tell you one activity that I did there, which was, I told kids, okay, summarize your life in one line. And these were 6th graders. 6th graders, okay, don't forget that, that's significant. 6th graders. And so they summarized their lives in different lines, different things. A lot of these were common quotations that you have. But one girl says, so you know, ma'am, I think if all your dreams break into 1,000 pieces, it's okay to pick up one of the pieces and go ahead. And I was like, I can't even think this way. This is so specific to a certain kind of experience that someone has had. But coming back to my point, I was ridiculed. And I wanted to tell those people that just because you see the urban kids physically well, right? Their clothes are not torn, they don't bear scars on their face. You're not understanding the problems that we deal with here are so specific and so unique, right? You talk of the millennium cities, their problems are far more invisible and layered and complex that you don't even know how to attack it, all right? So for example, many of my kids, most of my kids have psychological issues that we are still going to find names for. We don't know them. These are kids coming from families where money is compensated for with time because parents don't have time. Parents have conflicts of the very urban, hectic, chaotic life where certain kinds of professional demands are made of you, where you feel inadequate, and a person who feels inadequate, how will we give a sense of adequacy to his child or her child, right? I have had kids, you know, there's this one child in my class who would always just out of habit contradict me. He started irritating me after a while. I'm a human being, right? But when we realized, all right, that this is happening, and I approached the school counselor that why does he keep doing this here? They go, Saumya, no one hears him out. No one is hearing him out, okay? And she just had to say that. And when I started working with this knowledge that there is a backstory, that there are 20 backstories in a class of 20 students, or maybe 40 backstories in a class of 20 students, that's when, after 2 weeks, this kid walks up, smiles at me, says good morning. He'd never done that in life. I was flabbergasted. I was so happy. But one of the others that I've worked closely with is with kids who are differently abled. So thankfully, my school had a department for them. And I used to be a peer educator for our integrated curriculum. So I used to teach economics to certain kids who were speech and hearing impaired or who had other kind of cognitive or learning disabilities. Then social media happened. And one of these kids who, she couldn't speak and she had very little hearing, and she commented on my Facebook DP, "Ma'am, you're so beautiful." I can't tell you. And the amount of demonization that media, like social media has undergone, I just kicked that out of the window, and we as teachers sat down to think how to use it proactively because this is not going anywhere, how to use it productively. And so rather than discouraging our students from being on Facebook, which they in any case will be, right? In fact, in certain very progressive school, I went and I said, "Aap sab Facebook pe ho?" "No ma'am, that's not allowed. Our teachers forbid it." I'm like, okay, but ma'am, hum Instagram pe hain. You can follow us there. Because the elder generation, sorry, doesn't know about Instagram, right? So teachers will not tell you, don't be on social media. They say, don't be on Facebook. Because that's equatable for them. Kids said, okay, Snapchat Zindabad. Kids will find a way. But when we as teachers started adapting to the needs and requirements of the younger generation, when we all as a cohort entered social media, we saw behavioral changes in our kids. You know, you could be uncouth and opinionated, but when you know that an elder is watching, and few of those elders you will also respect, few of the teachers I really love, just FYI, not all of us are hated. So their language became okay. They started responding to us. Initially, they hated our integration, then our presence got normalized. You know, if a new child comes in the class, for some time you're like, "Kaun hai? Kya hai?" I think we as teachers were those alien species. Now we are a part of their system. So now when they are doing problematic stuff, either they'll be smart enough to block us from that post. Otherwise, we can look for patterns and use social media to our advantage.
That's a very important point that you just spoke about. Adaptation is very important. I've been working into the education technology for quite some time now. And one of the reasons why such technologies or such initiatives fail or die a natural death is because there is no adaptation. What role do you think technology will play in a better tomorrow, in making a better tomorrow for education?
All right. Again, it's a very technical question, and it's something that I'm experimenting with. I'm not adept at it as of now. I see technology not as a solution to the problem. The solution is the end. I see technology as the means to achieving a certain end. You could define that end. You could define that end as a certain degree of qualifying learning outcomes. You could define that end as a certain degree of psychosocial educational learning outcomes. or whatever, right? I see technology as a bridging mechanism. I see technology as an efficiency mechanism. I see technology as a democratizing mechanism, all right? By which I mean, unfortunately, Delhi will continue to have better standards of education than, say, name a town in Bihar, yaar. I mean, I'm so ill-informed and I'm so ignorant, and I'm admitting, okay, Gaya, okay, and Bhagalpur, and you know, we can just test each other's geographical knowledge in a while. But maybe what technology will be able to do is reduce the time loss and the efficiency loss in the delivery mechanism. I still believe the creation mechanisms are going to be human-led. I don't see creation, strategy, visioning going towards machines as of now, but machines are going to add greater efficiency and democracy to this entire process, all right? I have dabbled in the education technology field a little, I wouldn't say a lot. I mean, it's been 2 years, but I think in 2 years, my starting point was very different from today because the environment around me has changed. You know, it's toppled over, it's turned turtle. So, when you're in the technology field, please understand, other than creating, you're running to keep pace with, okay, what's new? What more can I implement? So by the time you understand the implementation of a previous technology, a new and a more efficient technology has come in, and you have to constantly learn yourself. Which led me to another understanding that all of us are bent towards building technological systems of education for the end user who we think is the student, all right? The student still needs enabling because a lot of times in a country like India, a student is not even enabled with a device. All right, let's take the entire span of the psychosocial, of the social economic scale into consideration. I believe that in India, you definitely need to have what we call a certain percolation model of affairs. So you have to empower pivots who empower a larger network, who empower a larger network, who empower a larger network, okay? And you can only have the first span of control over a certain degree of people. Uske baad kya hoga, you can just hope to death. That what I'm hoping happens. I believe technology needs to be used more to enable teachers, number one. Because a certain degree of humane mentorship, of human intervention, kids across the country are going to need. They are not self-sufficient from the word go, right? And that is why I think technology adoption in terms of home learning, personal learning, self-learning is going to be greater after a certain age. Now, unfortunately, by that age, all the fundamentals have been set. All right, the most difficult to teach. So when I take teaching assignments, I refuse to teach classes below 6 standard because teaching below 6 standard is specialized. It needs a certain vocabulary. I can teach college systems like no one rules better than me. Put me in a pre-primary classroom, I'm going to sweat completely because the vocabulary that you need to talk to a little baby, all right, who's coming to the school maybe vomiting on the road, who's coming to the school today thinking कि मैं तो सिर्फ गाना गाऊंगा, उसको समझने के लिए, while enabling his personality, also making sure that numeracy, language literacy, and an understanding of the community, society, and the world and environment is built into him. I am not sure how much machines can do it efficiently. They can build modules. They can't ensure efficient delivery of those modules, right? I believe technology adoption is necessary to ensure standardization of delivery, right? Why technology, what I'm learning in Delhi can be taught in as many of those places in Bihar that we were trying to think of the name of. And why Bihar, yaar? All of the Northeast, all of the Southern India, all of Kashmir, all of Gujarat, everywhere.
Even Delhi.
Everywhere. And thankfully, we have at least the technology infrastructure to a great degree available with us. So we are not, at least वो infrastructure side से हम sorted हैं कि ये हमने बना लिया, डिलीवर कैसे करेंगे, डिलीवर भी हो जाएगा, एब्जॉर्प्शन कैसे मेजर करेंगे, सीपेज कैसे मेजर करेंगे, और उसके बाद के आउटकम्स कैसे मेजर करेंगे, और क्या आप सही चीज़ मेजर कर रहे हो. अगर एक बच्चा अच्छे से एक फिजिक्स का लॉ एक्सप्लेन कर देगा, बट ही वुडंट नो हाउ टू बिहेव विद हिज सीटमेट इन द क्लासरूम, इज दैट अ गुड आउटकम और अ बैड आउटकम? How will you measure it? What should you measure it again? And I am going to be always interested in the last student of my class and the last student of the country. So I have been involved in building EdTech enabled learning solutions as well. And I have a team of some wonderful content developers for me, and I keep telling them, okay, when you're building this content, don't build it for the most intelligent student. Build it for the last student in the last village of India. He should be able to understand it. Build it for the last student sitting on the last bench of a school which doesn't have desks. She should be able to understand it. She should be able to relate to it. It should derive from their context. There is where we face a problem, the problem of context. The learning happens great by examples, right? Only theory will not do anything. How do you ensure standardization in examples? How do you know that the example that works for a child in, say, Orissa is going to work for a child in Kashmir? That's where technology with localization comes into play. And when I say localization, I don't just mean examples, I mean accent. I had a Kashmiri batchmate in Jamia, I'm from Jamia, and he used to speak in a very, very Polish accent that we could never comprehend. But जब वो हिंदी बोलता था तो उसकी हिंदी समझ में नहीं आती थी. उसकी कश्मीरी भी थोड़ी सी वॉप थी. I was like, how did he get such a nice Brit/American accent? And it wasn't, it was a gobbled up accent. And we realized the hegemony still exists. He's been artificially taught that accent. The Indian English accent is the most beautiful accent in the world. It is the most comprehensible, right? The Australian, the American accent take a lot of effort for us to comprehend. So why should one kind of accent also dictate what kind of teaching will happen? Because then whoever is listening is going to adapt. What will happen to the vernacular flavor? What will happen to the regional learning? What will happen to their own examples? So if I'm teaching food preservation, मैं हर जगह जैम बनाना नहीं सिखाऊंगी यार. मैं मुरब्बे भी बनाना सिखाना चाहूंगी because that is so much more accessible and acceptable for that child, right? I do believe technology is doing a great role and we are stretching it to its limits, but not enough. We need to localize it, customize it, we need to personalize it, and we need to make sure that the context of the child gets importance. All right, when you start teaching English to a child in, say, a pre-primary school in a cosmopolitan like Delhi, you assume he comes from a Hindi-speaking background. Doesn't happen. What if he's a Malayali? What if he's coming from a Bangla background? How do you build upon the knowledge that he has? He doesn't. No one comes from a 0 point of knowledge, na? So then you customize curricula. You build a system which is inclusive of diversity. So technology, first of all, for enabling centers which become further enablers, and then you hope to death that all of this percolates down, all right?
Adaptive technology.
No, I'm specifically talking about percolation. What I'm saying is, at certain degrees, say, the purpose of education is also to build leaders, right? You can't make 1.3 billion of us into leaders, right? At max, in one real lifetime, one human being, how many leaders do you think he can nurture? 10? At max? But those 10 can nurture 10 more. The other 10 can nurture 10 more. You do your bit with the 10 and then you hope to death. The technology that will come in is going to increase this span by an exponent, all right? Let's assume that's what's going to happen. Number one, technology needs to build empowering centers wherein with a human, semi-human, semi-machine approach, dissemination happens, at least enabling happens. At least there's no resource crunch. At least the teacher or the enabler, the facilitator is not scurrying around कि data कहाँ से लाऊं बच्चों को दिखाने के लिए. मेरे पास तो इस चीज़ का photo ही नहीं है. How do I make a heart more accessible? I can't keep drawing on the board. I'm not a great drawer or sketcher or a painter or what, artist, right? But I have this beautiful VFX model that just shows the cross section of the heart. And however you want to imagine pumping of blood here and there, I don't even need to buy a model. वो मॉडल ऑब्सोलीट मतलब वेयर एंड टेयर हो जाएगा आफ्टर अ वाइल अगर बच्चे खेलेंगे उससे. टेक्नोलॉजी थोड़ा सॉर्ट कर देगी वो चीज़, पर उसको कम्युनिकेट फिर भी करने के लिए आई नीड एन एफिशिएंट टीचर. सो दैट्स नंबर वन, राइट? इनेबल टीचर्स, बिल्ड करिकुला दैट ऑल्सो इनेबल्स टीचर, बिल्ड सॉल्यूशंस दैट इनेबल टीचर्स. नंबर टू, build your technology led modules for the last student of the country, not of the class, not of the city, not of the community, for the last student of the country. Number three, customization, localization, regionalization. है ना टेक्नोलॉजी, सिर्फ एक वीओ ही तो चेंज करना है, थोड़े से एग्जाम्पल्स ही तो चेंज करने हैं, थोड़ा सा ओएसटी चेंज करना है, कर देंगे. एफर्ट लगेगा, एफर्ट मारना पड़ेगा. वो एफर्ट भी ह्यूमंस ही मारेंगे, वो अपने एब्रेशंस लेके आएंगे. टेक्नोलॉजी थोड़े से एब्रेशंस को स्मूदन आउट करने में हेल्प कर देगी. मैं बीइंग हु आई एम ऑल्सो गोइंग टू अप्रोच टेक्नोलॉजी विद लॉट ऑफ ह्यूमन लेंस एंड थिंक वेयर विल दिस बी इनइफेक्टिव. आई एम नॉट द पर्सन हु ऑलवेज कीप्स थिंकिंग ये इफेक्टिव कैसे होगा. इफेक्टिव हो जाएगा बहुत तरीकों से, बट लूपहोल्स निकाल के उनको क्लब करना, उनको फिल करना, प्लग करना, वो भी ज़रूरी है. एंड हैविंग वर्कड विद टेक्नोलॉजी फॉर अ बिट, आई कैन टेल यू पोटेंशियल है. अनफॉर्चुनेटली इसके इनेबलर्स ह्यूमन बींग्स हैं. तो वो देखना है.
You raised a very amazing point, you know. Not many people are talking about the fact that education technology is ideally being built to facilitate teachers and nothing else. That's the only way it will actually be very effective. Uh,
Should be built.
yeah.
Is not being built, should be built.
Should be built. There are initiatives who are actually doing that kind of work, and the questions that you raised in your answer are so valid. I mean, any company that is into edtech can have answers to your question, and or is at least pursuing them, could see the better tomorrow and the technology that you want. And the best part about humans is once we start talking about it, things get rolling and happen. And I must say this has been a very, very wonderful conversation, and you justify the tag of a teacher, because I have learned a lot myself through this conversation, and can't thank you enough to give your time, to give your knowledge, your insights to us, and well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a wonderful
to see
time.
you again on Wise Edge.
I would love to come. I had a wonderful time. I also learned a lot. I learned certain jargons, which we would have edited out by the end of this show, but which I'm going to go back home and read up a lot on about. And I may have been all over the place, but I'm just this person who's constantly in hope. And when I see a hopeless road, I just build another one. That's all that there is.
Wonderful. I think that's a good note to end the conversation in.
Always what I wanted, to have the last word. Thank you, Ankit. It was wonderful being at Wise Edge.